everybody. Welcome to the live recording of a Mormon Expression podcast, a production of the Whitefields Educational Foundation. My name's Heather Clarkson. I am the director of Mormon Expression Voices and a semi-regular panelist on Mormon Expression. I'd like to thank the people who are here at a live event for the very first time. We hope you enjoy yourselves. And for those of you who are here at a subsequent live event that you've already been to a few, thank you for coming as well. Today's discussion will be about the Mormon doctrine of the pre-existence for dummies, and as always with Mormon Expression, the dummies are us. So I hope you enjoy the podcast, and please help me welcome our panel.
All right, welcome. We have another wonderful panel here. First of all, let me introduce, starting to my right is the lovely Zilpha. Hi, Zilpha.
Hello, John. Hello, everybody.
And then we have the pit bull of Mormon Expression, the wonderful Amy Blosch.
Hi, everyone.
And they say even in the end, the very elect will be deceived, but not all of them, because we have one of the intellectual greats of the ex-Mormon world, Brian Jolly's here.
Whoa, that's way too flattering. Thank you, Doug.
All right. So, most of the people who are listening to this are not here right now. We are in Greece. We're in Rome. For some reason, whenever you watch church productions of the pre-existence, in BYU productions in the 60s, you know what I'm talking about. They always had the pre-existence, and they're always set in Rome for some reason. So we have the columns, we have the togas, and we're here in Rome to discuss the pre-existence. So that's our topic for today.
Do we need to release our...
Yes, this is my spirit daughter, Dupree, and she is ready to take her turn on earth.
Now, hopefully there'll be a perfectly delightsome family for
Waiting
her
for her. I
to
don't
go
know.
down to.
There could be a shift, I have a feeling.
So, like I said, the pre-existence is always in Rome, and one thing that's interesting, of course, in all of religious dialogue is the history of ideas as they come through, and they get influenced and picked up from one culture to the other. What is fascinating about the pre-existence is it's one of the few uniquely Mormon things, and I think it's one of the greatest of the Mormon things. And right now, in the last 30 years or so, we've been trying to distance ourselves from everything Mormon. We've been trying to convince the world that we're just Protestants. But this idea has legs, and so many people love it, and it influences everything, and for the next hour or so, that's what we want to talk about. We do have a house mic. Janae here has the house mic. So if you want to add your 2 bits in any point of our discussion, just start waving your hand madly. Alternatively, if you're really tenacious, you can just come here to the podium, and then we'll work you right in. Okay, so I love the pre-existence. I think it's a great idea. It doesn't work at all, but it is just such a wonderful idea, and it just comes out everywhere in Mormonism. Like when a 6-year-old starts playing the piano, that's the pre-existence, right? When I'm a fabulous, middle-aged, slightly overweight white guy who's running the church, well, that's the pre-existence, right? You can justify anything for it. If you don't give black people the priesthood, we can't do anything about it. It's the pre-existence, right? Because there's this whole machine that's feeding into everything we're doing.
One of the things I think is really interesting about the whole idea of premortal life is if you take the 2 assumptions, the one that your birth is incredibly unlikely. The odds of you being here depends completely on your parents meeting and each of their parents meeting and all their parents meeting, and you think of the difficulty in any of those events happening and combining them, it becomes very improbable that you'd be here at all. The other thing that you've got is that God could see all this ahead of time. He knew ahead of time what our families would be like, how many of us there would be in each family. And when you combine those 2 ideas, you're left with this situation where there are no accidental births because God wouldn't have made a spirit for somebody who's never going to get a family. And what I think is kind of compelling about that is I worry about like the LDS moms who think that there's another baby and oh gosh, there's a spirit child waiting in heaven. But there's never been a mistake in all the families prior to now. So however many children you choose to have, that's how many God was planning on you having anyway. You could just pick one, and that's what God was planning on.
So you're referring to the idea that our spirits look like our bodies?
Well, but like the configuration of our families was already set out
predetermined
ahead
number.
of time.
Right,
I don't
it
know
would
how
have to be.
doctrinal that part is.
Well, but it has to be, because if there was a mistake 7 generations ago, that would have a cascading compounding effect. Right? Well, in conference, they talked about one guy left the church, then 3,000 people were out of the church. So it's the same sort of thing. If you...
Well, maybe
I was going to say something crude, but we're in public. It's easier in my living room. If you were to not procreate a baby, that baby could have had other babies, and there were this huge influence of people who are like SOL up in the pre-existence because they couldn't come down where they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Papua New Guinea is the place reserved for those folks, I guess.
Oh, sad.
Yeah, you had something
I
to
thought
say.
it was Madagascar.
All right, what
What do you do with the leftover spirit babies? I mean, that would be a tragedy.
There are no leftovers. They keep coming.
Well, probably if you ruin your line of,
Your downline?
righteousness, then God will just send like the worst spirits. He won't send the righteous spirits to that line anymore, right?
So there's just sort of leftover spirits, but they so they chose
Not
their first
leftover.
estate, but not very well.
Do the bad spirits know they're bad spirits? Like when they get to the jump-off point?
I would have to think they know they've been waiting around. They're at the back of the line.
But wait.
No, they haven't been waiting around. They've been coming down, trickling all
But
along.
John, by the way, told us that if we were waiting around, we were the select chosen ones saved for the last
only
generation.
if you were sent to an LDS family.
But you wouldn't know that, would you? You just know you're in the green room, right?
No, because you choose your parents. She chose me.
We chose our parents.
There's no doctrine that says that.
What about like the
That's
crack
Doctrine,
babies?
schmoctrine. I
A
heard it in
folk
sacrament
doctrine.
meeting.
All right, so okay. Well, there was a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple comments real quick. Now, the active listeners would just hate us if we didn't.
Wait, when
clear
you
this
say
up.
active, do you mean like they jog a lot or they go to church? What do you mean by active?
Active, going to church
Oh,
every,
okay.
every Sunday, all that good stuff. But we're saying pre-existence, and pre-existence rocks. But with the church right now, we're not saying pre-existence. We're saying pre-mortal existence or pre-earth life.
That's
So,
true. We're old school here. We
for
like
sure,
the
for sure.
we like the old-fashioned terms.
But Zilpha brought up something pretty awesome, and she said, "Our spirits, what do they look like, and do they look like our bodies?" Well, we kind of throw that off a lot. Mothers think they see their babies before they're born and stuff, and post-mortally, we know that's the case because we have Brigham Young talking to Joseph, and he sees Joseph, appears to him and stuff. So post-mortally, our spirits look like our bodies, and a lot of times we think, well, pre-mortally, same thing.
Right.
But there's a problem with genetics, right?
So if you were an identical twin, like 10 million years ago, you're walking around, you run into a guy, you look just like me.
An identical twin in the spirit world. Well, I do have, not only humans look like their spirits, but also animals. The spirits of animals, this is in the Sacred Truths of the Doctrine and Covenants, Volume 2. The spirits of animals are in the likeness of their bodies. The spirit is eternal and does not change. The spirit of an elephant looks like an elephant. The spirit of a man looks like a man. This is true of all creatures under heaven. Therefore, the body of the creature cannot change and evolve into something different and still look like its spirit. This principle is simply stated by the Lord that there might not be any misunderstandings.
So the creation, not only we talk about the families, but everything is fixed. Everything was predetermined, right? Let's go and see the doctrinal basis for this. I have here my scriptures in my hand, and this is from the book of Moses. And I love the book of Moses. Like we worry about the gold plates and we worry about the papyrus from the Pearl of Great Price. But the Book of Moses, Joseph just sat down and wrote it, and like nobody seems to have any problem with that. He just penned this thing off, and here it is. It's right here in the scriptures, and we don't argue about that. All right, so chapter 3 of the Book of Moses, written in 1830, verse 5, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For I, the Lord God, created all things of which I have spoken spiritually, before they were naturally upon the face of the earth. So the creation is in two parts, right? And as a matter of fact, this is how scholarly Mormons resolve the Genesis problem, right? In the book of Genesis, there's two accounts of the creation. And biblical scholars will tell you, because there's two books in the Old Testament, the J text, the Jehovah text, and the Elohim text, and they were sort of mashed together, and it causes problems. But Mormon scholars say, no, what's lost is the truth that there were two creations. There was one in which God went through and created everything in spiritual form, the grass, the plants, the elephants.
The velociraptors? The
velociraptors and
Those
Amy's
came from
spiritual
another
daughter.
planet.
And then another one where it happened physically. But once again, that means a rut was plowed, of which the physicality of the entire universe just follows, right?
But humans, they weren't created, they were born from heavenly parents. The spirits, somehow the exalted bodies of the heavenly parents were able to birth spiritual children, a whole bunch of them.
So the spirits look just like the bodies, right?
That's what
So like
gathered.
Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother produced a child that looked kind of like a hybrid of my parents?
Well, Brigham Young made clear that spiritual reproduction was by the same means and method.
Yeah.
Yeah, but 9 months gestation for one spirit.
We were doing the math on the way down. So there's about 7 billion people on the planet today. And if some people estimate that 1/10 of everybody who's ever been here or on the planet. So let's round that down for purposes you'll see here in a minute to 66.6 million people. Well, 1/3 the host of heaven was cast out, right? We'll get there in a minute. That was 100 billion, right? So 9-month gestation, that's 900 billion months that Eve that our mother in heaven would have been.
Well, that's why you have lots of wives. You can speed that up.
we need the 12, we need the quorum
Yeah,
of
but
wives.
a really big
for our-
number divided
For the
by a small
tribes.
number is still a really big number.
Probably like she could have a quorum at a time.
Like puppies, like in a litter. Go ahead.
Well, you're considering in human time, doesn't God work on God's time? Like
Just like
1,000 years is
that.
like 1 year to him or
Boom.
something?
Well,
Like
I-
human
Time
years?
wouldn't mean anything to an eternal
So wouldn't it be
being.
like 9 seconds would be your gestation period?
Yeah, I don't see time being a problem for
Once again, we totally
Supernatural
lose
being.
out as women.
Yeah, you're eternally just popping out babies.
Well, I mean, I guess anything is possible, but you know, this begs the question of resurrection altogether. Because if you were to cut me open right now, you'd find a spleen, and you'd find a liver, and you'd find lungs, and you'd find a whole bunch of stuff of which ostensibly I have no need for at all after I'm resurrected. So what's the point of resurrection altogether? But I was taught very clearly by my mother, although she denies it now, that if you didn't make it to the celestial kingdom, you would be spiritually castrated.
Nice.
You wouldn't keep your dangly bits. So that was how we keep people in the celestial and terrestrial kingdom from
Definitely not heaven.
from making the rest of eternity more bearable. All right.
Well, I have a question about it. So if we're stuck on the idea that we look like our spirits look, what does that mean for Africans, people of African descent? If that's a curse, does their spirits still look the same, or how does that?
Well, I think, to be fair, that probably most people who would defend the doctrine would say it was something more like a platonic form of a person. That when they say you were like a person, meaning you had like
nose
hands and
and two
nose and
eyes.
eyes, and you looked because you would have known your father and mother in heaven. So you would have known what they look like in their glorified physical bodies. So you had an appearance like them. And when people describe spiritual experiences of seeing beings, well, in the temple, Peter, Paul, and Mary, or Peter, Paul, and up here, right? And they hadn't been born yet, but they looked, they shook hands, so they looked. We already discussed the conundrum of that a few weeks ago, but they were there, so they look,
So just vaguely like humanoids.
Well, from the DNC, I think we would conclude, the 129, we would conclude that they're indistinguishable in our eyes. Like, if one of them appeared to you right now, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But I guess they don't have a spleen and stuff like that. It's just that...
And they're white.
What?
They'd be white, right?
That's what we were taught.
Okay, so let's make sure we review the doctrine before we go on and talk about some of these more implications. So, a long time ago, meaning before... go ahead.
So, I look a lot different now than I looked when I was 4. So, what do I look... am I a baby in the pre-existing... Do I have to grow up and become 45 and then... Oh, you're getting born and then shrink back down, or...
In the Journal of Discourses, Volume 4, page 218, it says, "We were first begotten as spirit babies in heaven, and then born naturally on earth. But I think probably the spirit babies, before you come to earth, they become an adult, a spirit adult. And then that adult isn't a baby, and then it grows up into an adult.
Kind of like a Benjamin Buttons kind of a thing.
Go on.
Well, that we kind of have a weird cycle of birth and regression, and then regression and birth.
All right.
It's Warner
Yeah.
Brothers. It's,
We
I had
haven't seen it.
a
you haven't
cartoon
seen it?
book
Okay.
called something about Mormonism, the essence of Mormonism or something. It was by the same guy who did the cartoon book, The Book of Mormon on Trial, which you all need to run to the Desert Industries and get a copy of. But he had them drinking from a fountain of youth, kind of a Ponce de Leon thing, and they all turned to about 30. But, in the King Follett discourse, if you happen to die when you're 2, you're stuck as a 2-year-old for all eternity on thrones, ruling. Which, remember, is my theory of our God, that he's a 9-year-old. All right. So if we go back from our birth, we will find a spiritual birth to our heavenly parents. And before that, we are what was referred to as intelligences. And the intelligences seem to have 2 characteristics. They seem to have consciousness, self-awareness, and they seem to have free will, at least to some extent, because otherwise they'd be a machine, right? They wouldn't have any. But that's just briefly mentioned, and nobody knows what the hell it means at all.
The intelligences?
They say we are co-eternal with God in the form of intelligence. So we have our current estate, where we have physical beings, then the premortal estate, where we are spiritual children of our Father in heaven, and then we have the foggy sort of
Spiritual matter unorganized.
It's like the Cimmerillion.
Joseph Smith said, in the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, it's recorded, he said, "Where did the soul come from? The mind or the intelligence which man possesses is co-equal with God himself. The intelligence of spirits had no beginning, neither will it have an end." So, intelligences were not created, but somehow they got into the spirit babies, and then they move on from there.
But Brigham Young taught, I don't mean to bring this point up again, but Brigham Young taught it was through the normal procreative process, through celestial sex.
Copulation.
Right. Okay, so that is where we all came from. We were all the spiritual offspring of our Father in heaven, who presumably was spiritual offspring of his Father in heaven, and on back to the turtles that go all the way down.
All the way down.
So let's talk about some of the implications of this doctrine. The first one, Brian, you guys have all kind of skirted around a little bit, is race. This doctrine had the most purchase in explaining race. Now, we need to spend more time going into all this, but latter-day scriptures have a lot to say about race. They tell us that Bigfoot was Cain, who was cursed from the beginning for murdering his brother. Well, maybe not the Bigfoot part, but he was given a mark of darkness. And that the teaching, which is very, very clear, it's not hard to find, was that everybody who comes from African descent, who has dark skin, was descended from this line of Cain. And according to the Pearl of Great Price, the lineage of Cain, because the problem is the flood, right, what happened, Cain hung on the boat, and that's how he got up into Seattle.
I thought it was a servant.
What?
A servant
The
of
servant?
Noah.
Cain was?
Or a wife of
Wasn't
some...
like
like a
the
brother-in-law.
line preserved through
Ham.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm talking about Cain himself because he's cursed to wander
Oh,
the
right,
land.
right, he's cursed,
We have to
right.
explain
Well,
Cain, right?
you could,
But
if he can't die, drown him. He's not going to kill him. He'll just get wet.
To swim for 40
So
days.
Ham, who was from the righteous line, took a dark-skinned woman to wife, and that lineage was cursed and was unable to hold the priesthood, and we know that because they're black. And it says right clearly that Egyptus, who discovered Thebes underneath the water, and who it was named, was part of that curse. And the Pharaoh wanted the priesthood, but he couldn't have the priesthood because he was cursed. He was black. And that was a huge thing, right? And it came down, and then you go by, and there's people of African descent in America, and they can't have the priesthood. Now, there will be, not only can they not have the priesthood, but they can't even go to the temple. We brush that one over so often because we always ignore women, right? It's never about the women, but the women weren't allowed to go, the black women weren't allowed to go in the temple. There'll be apologists who will tell you about Abel, what's his name?
Cain?
Elijah Abel.
Yeah.
Elijah Abel.
Yeah.
Who was part white, who was black. But they don't tell you about the time when he was publicly in a ceremony ripped of his priesthood when they figured it out in the conference center. They publicly did a defrocking of his priesthood, which you probably didn't even know was a ceremony, but apparently it is. So blacks were not to be part of the, and there are people in this room right now who could come down to this microphone and tell you about their mission experience where they were told, just sort of steer clear of the black neighborhoods. And this is post 1978. So that doctrine of the pre-existence, or we're trying to get around to, was the entire justification. Oh my goodness, my underwear is showing. Zilpha, my thing's a little see-through, so she told me to not wear underwear, but I said, no, I'll just let him see my underwear. So the pre-existence is the entire justification for it, because we can get away with any sort of discrimination, right? Because it is their fate from beforehand.
It's interesting just to mention the Genesis group in the LDS Church, the group of African American LDS members, they believe they have some sort of doctrinal support to state that Elijah Abel is a general authority, or was a general authority. Just as a side note, I had a conversation with a woman, a black Mormon woman, and she refers to him as a general authority, President Abel.
Well, he was a 70.
Right.
But so was everybody. You guys know this
At the
story,
beginning.
right? After Joseph Smith died, the 12 were in charge of the 70, and the stake president was in charge of the deacons, priests, and elders. So Brigham Young ordained everybody to be a 70. Did you guys know that, right? There was a time in the church where there were no deacons, teachers, priests, or elders. Everybody was a 70.
So back to this pre-existence
Well, I'm
stuff.
on a roll, man. Don't stop me. Okay.
So the idea, I think what John was trying to say about the blacks and the pre-existence is that they weren't as righteous in the pre-existence. So for them to go to a black body instead of a white body was justified somehow. That they weren't really deserving of the priesthood because of what they did in the pre-earth life.
Which goes against the Articles of Faith completely.
True.
Which was my apostasy moment one at about 13, when I was like, wait a minute.
Well, no, it was their transgression. Oh, you're talking about the skin color.
Yes. If men shall be punished for their own sins and not for Adam's transgression.
But the preexistence takes care of that, because they're being punished for their behavior in the preexistence.
But what about the lineage of Cain?
They just happen, they get those bodies because then everybody can tell which people shouldn't get the priesthood.
You know how in like high school when they pick teams and you were like the last one picked?
No, I do not know anything about that.
The other kids. It's like that. There was a comment.
Yeah, I just was wondering, is there any doctrinal basis? I know the African race was like the less righteous in the pre-existence. They were the fence sitters. They weren't sure to either to jump fence to the 1/3 or not. But what about the other races, the other non-white races? What about the second curse in the Americas? Were they fence sitters too? Is there any doctrinal basis for their fence sitting? Or was it totally based on Laman and Lemuel's wonderful whatevers? And what about other non-whites?
Yeah, where did the Chinese fit in
What
terms
about
of
like
righteousness?
that?
I think we tend to ignore the others.
I mean, what's the doctrinal basis for that in the pre-existence?
I don't think there is one.
I don't recall ever reading anything specific about that. Brigham Young once said that in the celestial kingdom, the Asians would be the housekeepers, but the cooks and stuff. Isn't that what he said? So I think there was a general racism towards, but I know into the middle of the 19th and the middle of the 20th century, all races could be baptized and go through the temple except for those of African descent.
Can we go into the war now?
Oh, we mentioned the fence sitters, yeah.
Right, because it doesn't make sense without the war.
Okay.
Okay, there was a war in heaven, and what it was about, it wasn't a bloody war. It was a war of words, I suppose. There was two plans. One was proposed by Jesus, which was sanctioned by God the Father, and the other was proposed by Lucifer, later known as Satan. And Jesus proposed a plan where everybody would go to earth and there would be opposition, there would be pain and sorrow.
All right, just so I can explain
It's a
for
tug-of-war.
our
Yes.
listeners. This is the book, My Turn on Earth storybook by Carolyn Pearson. And if you look inside, this is how they describe the war on heaven to little kids. And it's an image of, it's a cartoon of two groups of kids playing tug-of-war, and they're pulling really hard.
Are they all white?
They are all
they're all white here.
Okay.
But they do have different colored hair. There's a redhead, brunette. So there's some variety.
Diversity.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and this is based on Mormon scriptures in Moses chapter 4. And I, the Lord God, spake unto Moses, saying, That Satan, whom thou hast commanded in the name of mine only begotten, is the same which was from the beginning. And he came before me, saying, Behold, here I am, send me, I will be thy son, and I will redeem all mankind, that one soul shall not be lost. And surely I will do it. Therefore give me thine honor. But behold, my beloved son, which was my beloved and chosen from the beginning, always a favorite, said unto me, Father, thy will be done, and the glory be thine forever. Wherefore, because that Satan rebelled against me, and sought to destroy the agency of man which I, the Lord God, had given him, and also that I should give unto him mine own power by the power of mine only begotten, I caused that he should be cast down, and he became Satan, yea, even the devil, the father of all lies, to deceive and to blind men and to lead them captive at his will, even as many as would not hearken unto my voice.